The unretired engineer here, going to talk about novel writing and hard science fiction today. So, every space opera needs faster than light travel if you're not just going to have a type of Western or whodunit in an exotic location. But hard science fiction has a taller hill to climb in that you want to make the technology at least reasonably believable and become a context within that world that draws the reader in. So, warp drive and hyperspace, they've been around since Star Trek and Babylon 5, and they're workable systems and that they have their place. But everybody these days says, oh, well, you have the Einstein limit, which is real, but the question is, how do you get around it? But it tends to break that suspended disbelief. So, the other problem with it is I always feel there's a little bit of a submarine vibe in dive, dive, dive. If it's off to Alpha Centauri, we go. So there are alternate approaches. One of them is the jump drive. I'm a big Gordon R. Dixon fan from back in my childhood with the Dorsai Genetic General and the jump drive. You jump across real space. It's not just because I'm an engineer and I kind of have my doubts about hyperspace or warp drive. It's that by having that a different kind of approach, you can build a different texture, a deeper texture into your world, and use that to your advantage as you're working with your reader. Hard science fiction has a contract with the reader. You need to essentially have a technology which is believable and that is, again, a underlayment to the story. But it can be very hard to write in that by creating that underlayment, you really need to kind of say, okay, why is it the way it is, and how does that then lay into the texture of the universe? And it can be boring and it can be frustrating if you don't do it right. Um, Many great science fiction doesn't do it that way. That you essentially you call in the warp drive or whatever, and you hand wave and you move on. Great science fiction writers do that all the time. They are more about or totally about the plot and the characters and the scenario, and they move on. But other stories I can read, they will basically leave me wondering why and what the heck just happened. That just doesn't seem consistent with the universe, and that can happen even in one where they haven't really gone the hard science fiction route. Yeah, engineers and scientists are good at hard science fiction because they understand that the universe is never very simple, that technology always has limitations, that it always has a background from which it came, and it has ways in which it breaks and ways in which it constrains what is possible. And by looking at those things and building those into your universe, you get a much deeper universe that is, can be much more engaging. In some ways, this goes back to the world of Dungeons and Dragons. I was a dungeon master when I was much younger, and I would create the maps. I would basically pull the universe together and create the scenario and then present it to the players, and the players would then have fun and I would have fun with the players. This is very similar, right? This is very much the same sort of thing. And it's also really very much the same sort of thing as with a concept engineering and systems engineering, where you're creating a concept and then you're taking it to hardware. The thing about writing a novel is you control a lot more of the variables, and it can be a lot of fun, well, particularly if you're a geek. In hard science fiction, the rules need to be consistent along with the consequences. If you are positing that you have thermonuclear power, then you need to posit that those thermonuclear power plants can fail in certain ways, and those ways need to be consistent, right? One of the things that you see in serial episodes on TV or in sometimes in serial novels is that the technology drifts over time. as the author or as the writers need different things, they will make their universe kind of conform to what they need in that particular episode. And consequently, things seem to shift a little. And this can be very frustrating to engineers who tend to get very engaged with the universe and kind of trying to figure out how it can work and where it goes. So, it basically can be really frustrating and break that fourth wall and take you out of the story. Consistency isn't really totally about kind of in age. It also is an adjunct for the writer in the sense that it adds a tactical texture and logic, operational logic, and strategic constraints in ways that become very natural to the story and to the universe and allow you to basically draw the reader in and keep them engaged in the story in a much deeper way. So the world, in a sense, builds itself, and that allows you to get deeper into the characters and the plot. So in my novels, the transit system, the jump system, basically posits wormholes and quantum foam. So the light speed is not really a limitation in that you're jumping from location to location instantaneously, so you're not going at a velocity, you're basically a step rate. So you step to here and then there and then next place. It's that step rate which gives you your overall apparent velocity through the universe. But at any one time, you're actually in real space. It's about covering distance in a time, not about velocity. So it's still a hand wave, and it's still the physics of it are very uncertain, but there is a practical backing to it that allows you to use that in an advantageous way rather than as a negative. So hard science fiction is based upon believable extended technology with believable characteristics and limitations in ways that the reader can, if they want, extrapolate further and think about. So think about it in this term, right? Go back to the electric motor. So you have electricity. Electricity allows you to make things go round and round. So now you can say, okay, I can make an egg beater. I can make an electric toothbrush. I can make a locomotive, electric car, electric ship. So I can have batteries, right? I have electricity. So electricity can electrocute you, or a battery can explode. Again, you have this universe and it's consistent and believable. So the same way, really, with the technology in hard science fiction. So in my system, the rail on the starship is what folds space, if you want to call it that. The rail is essentially a kind of like a linear accelerator that allows you to manipulate space. And it then is what kind of picks out that point in the quantum foam, expands it to a wormhole, and allows the ship to jump through. To do that, it requires a great deal of compute to calculate exactly what point do you want, how do you want to manipulate it to make the transit that you want. So it's a limitation of the rail, which essentially controls your volume, and then the compute, which controls your speed. So from that, you then say, okay, if I want to make more volume pass through space, I need more than one rail. So multi-rail, 2 rails, 3, up to 5, maybe more. And if you want compute, then you trade away volume inside that ship for compute, right? To give you speed, transit steps. So, it's always a matter of speed means more compute, means more volume inside the vessel, and less cargo, etc. So the Dagger, which is the auxiliary warship in the storyline. So a Dagger is a 2-rail system, a twin, and it's a relatively compact vessel, and most of the volume is taken up by compute and weapons, and that allows it to travel at very high speed. But think about it this way: it spends most of its time in real space, all of its time in real space. As in today, right? That means it's detectable, so you cover the ship with sheathing, which makes it look like a blade. That's why it's called a dagger. It looks like a very long, slender, dagger-like structure. Thus, from the structure of the technology posited comes, texture in the story, and thus, you basically move along. But at the same time, you don't want to overthink the tech, right? It gets boring for everybody else if you keep on inventing. So you need to stop inventing and write the characters, write the plot, move the story along, make it go. Now, one of my things is I really love the talking about tech and the extrapolation, whys, all the rest of it. So I'll tend to write paragraphs that really I then need to delete to make sure the story keeps moving along and that the reader is kept engaged with the character, not trying to convince them this technology, which I've just invented, might really work. So there's a tension between, to that instinct to add more and more detail and all the rest of it, and to skinny it down to make the story easy to follow, easy to read, and keep the readers who are interested in character and plot, don't care about the hard science fiction, keep them engaged, as well as those who do care about the technology and want to think more about, well, what if, keep them engaged as well. So an engineer's advantage in hard science fiction isn't really about technical accuracy. You've invented it, right? What the advantage is that we understand there are always limitations, there are always ways the system will break, and to think about those things and to build upon those to create a texture that adds to the veracity and the visceral feeling of the story as the characters move through it, as the plot evolves. All of those things that are engaged together to make it a fun read and to make something that they'll think about and say, oh, well, maybe, if I think about it this way, is that, might it have worked out a different way? So hopefully this has been a little bit of fun. You've liked this, so hit like, hit subscribe. If you have a question, please hit the comments. I do check on those. Also in the notes, some links to other content that I have blogged. Also an author page on Kindle. The story that I've talked about here, the trilogy, The Sea of Suns, and the first one, Stranded in the Stars, is up on Kindle. You can do Kindle Unlimited or buy the book. Either one, it's all great as far as I'm concerned. And I'm here, so if you want to get hold of me, please do so. So this is the Unretired Engineer. Cheers.